Thank you very much, and good morning. As a member of the faculty and administrator here at the University of Miami, it's a real pleasure to welcome you all here today. So we're thrilled that you are all able to converge on our campus, and we hope the sun will come out for you later today. As the first order of business, it's my pleasure to announce a new commitment. So I would like to call to the stage Vrinda Agarwal of the University of California at Berkeley, whose project is called the Delhi Shakti Project. The challenge is that on average, 92 women per day are raped in India, according to government figures for 2013. The report by India's National Crime Records Bureau also shows that young women under the age of 30 are at greater risk of assault, and recent crime data shows that victims were familiar with their assailants 94% of the time. Rape is most prevalent in India's largest cities, and in the capital city of Delhi, the number of rapes doubled from 2012 to 2013 to nearly 4 rapes per day. So what she's doing about it. Noting a lack of programs aimed specifically at women in slums, Vrinda has committed to helping women in Delhi's Balswa slum to create grassroots, community-driven solutions to gender-based violence. In partnership with like-minded NGOs such as Damini Project, Stop Rape Now, and the Gulabi Gang, Vrinda will bring together 30 women over the course of 4 weeks to discuss women's rights, privilege and power, violence prevention, and practical training in self-defense and peer support. During the final week of the program, women will be encouraged to develop their own recommendations for preventing sexual violence. The Delhi Shakti team plans to publish these recommendations in a report that will be shared with other NGOs and Delhi's local government to act as both a springboard for discussion and a roadmap for other communities seeking to take action. Please join me in congratulating Vrinda for this project. I'd now like to introduce today's panel, More Than a Roof, Solutions for Urban Slums. Urban slums are the world's fastest growing human habitat. Over 1 billion people now live in slums, with approximately 500,000 joining each week. By the year 2050, it's estimated that 7 in 10 people will live in cities all over the world. And in that same year, the number of people living in urban slums is expected to surpass 3 billion. Slums and informal settlements, indeed, are often hubs of informal economic activity, as well as innovative income generation. Indeed, in many cities, up to 60% of employment is in this informal sector. However, residents rarely hold any formal property rights and are often held back by a lack of infrastructure, as well as basic services like sanitation, electricity, and a dwelling that is stable and secure. So panelists and CGI U commitment makers here today will explore how entrepreneurship, financial services, and small business development can be promoted within urban slums to generate income and create sustainable livelihoods. They'll also look at community-driven urban planning and how that can create affordable, secure, and sustainable housing options for slum residents. So it's now my pleasure to welcome to the stage the panelists for today's conversation. Our first panelist is Kennedy Odede, co-founder and CEO of Shining Hope for Communities. Our next panelist is Melanie Walker, Senior Advisor to the President for the World Bank Group. And finally, Nasir Yudin, co-founder and president of Empower Energy Group. So I'd like to start our conversation with our panelists by asking them each to address some of the ways in which their backgrounds has influenced the way they got into the work that they're specifically involved with. So I'll start with Kennedy. You migrated from a village in Kibera when you were very young. So could you describe the everyday challenges that you faced as you confronted urban poverty, and how did these life experiences inform and motivate the work that you do today?
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm very happy to be with you here. So I grew up in Kibera slum, which is the largest slum in Africa, and it was a very, very hard life. What makes that it is a place that it's kind of isolated. If people struggle, hustling, you don't know what tomorrow gonna be. And what I come to find in Kibera was the abuse against women. And this makes sense. When you're so poor, you are hopeless, you know what I mean? Life is so hard. So people who suffer are women and children. And food was an issue. There's no job. It was a very, very hard life. But through that way, for me, the slum was a university of life. Became a place to study life, you know. But I believe that the only change we can do was by working with the community, by working with people. And I'm also very mad with how the world doesn't view slum as a place of workforce that can also change society. You know, it was more neglected.
Terrific, thank you. Nasir, could you discuss your experiences starting your particular initiative as a student? Obviously, that could be particularly impactful for the room full of students here today. And explicitly, could you address how you think students that are with us on this panel could utilize the resources of their universities to demonstrate the need and ultimately attract various funders as well as investors and other people of interest to their projects?
Sure, so that's a lot of questions. I'll try to remember all of them. So thank you for having me. I was actually just backtracking to explain the understanding behind where Empower sort of started and also where my passion grew. I myself was born and raised in a village in Bangladesh, and I came here when I was 12, and I was the first generation to go to college. And for me, there's a lot of folks that were mentors and guiders to get to where I was in the university life. And there was a presentation that was given with Engineers Without Borders, a few PhD students and others that saw an opportunity where they could go back and make a difference. One of them was native to Pakistan, specifically Karachi. And there was a large population that's living in and around that landfill there. And, you know, being an electrical engineer, some of them that were there, I was myself biomedical engineering, they saw an opportunity where, you know, what can we do without moving them, changing their lifestyle? How do we integrate seamlessly with the community to find a sort of a collective cause where it's more of a cooperative community development using sort of renewable resource-oriented development style change there. And after that, you know, discussion, I realized, you know, this is it. This is where, you know, sort of my calling came, where, you know, it's not about just going in and making a sort of one-time change or creating fundraising events and through organizations that I've been part of. This is more sustainable. And so that was it. That was for me is I went up to them and approached them. How do I get more involved? This is very early, on the early onset of the idea. And from there, it's really, and one thing I look back and I really emphasize to all the students here is that there's tremendous amount of free resource in the university. We still tap into the university globally. About, I would say, 60% of our volunteers are all university students, whether PhD master students or undergraduate students. And the key reason there is you can do proof of concept without, you know, breaking into your fundraising funds, breaking into any sort of program costs that you might have. Especially university professors that are research-oriented are already dedicating themselves in that category. And that's what we did. So initially, to prove that some of our ideas related to renewable resource technology, we did a lot of our work in universities. And then we're going to professors and having master students do their thesis with us, PhD students do their thesis for us, using our project and things like that. And it grew from there, and there's a lot of opportunities within the university that I think I can talk into a little bit later on, but I think that's a good start.
Great,
Yeah.
terrific. And Melanie, from your perspective at the World Bank, you get to see a kind of overall view of a lot of projects happening globally. So could you talk a little bit about, across all the many projects that you've seen, what are some shared traits of projects that have been successful? Are there common areas where you see failure, and what lessons can these students draw on based on your experience?
Oh my goodness, that is the hardest question. It's not fair. First, I want to say, Brenda, congratulations for what you do. It takes a lot to pull that out of yourself and bring the communities together and really focus. You got a lot of other stuff going on in your life right now, so you guys should all be super proud of her and do that. I don't know if my lessons from the World Bank are the best place to share with you at that right now, but I think that where I was at in college, and also, by the way, to all of you guys, congratulations for being up on a Saturday morning, because when I was in college, I might not have been here. I might have still been in bed, so thanks for coming. I worked at the Gates Foundation before I went to the World Bank, and before that, I was a physician. And at least from my perspective, I learned very young. My mom didn't go to college, didn't know very many women, Hispanic, nobody in my world really went to college, and I didn't see a huge future around me for myself. And I decided when I was little, I don't have to follow any rules. I can do whatever I want. Go to college, why not? There's nobody making me not do that. And as I grew up, I've never been a great rule follower. And the biggest lesson in my life is that you don't have to explain yourself. You just have to do what you think is right. And sometimes colleges will tell you, I had looking at the course catalogs, I'd be like, I don't want to do that major. I want to do all the majors, right? I want to do multidisciplinary. I want to learn all of this. And I would encourage you to think that way, because as I've grown in my career and I've tried different things, from the foundation experience to the World Bank experience, there's some very common things across all of it, whether you decide to do health or education. And I think my colleagues will agree that the things that drive success are if you think hard about the problem you're trying to solve, and you involve everybody that knows how to solve it with you. Don't sit in an office somewhere and be like, I'm going to solve this. The things that are going to be successful, innovation isn't always about creating some magical new thing. Sometimes innovation is about fixing something that already exists and finding a little tweak here and there. It doesn't have to be super magic, and it usually won't be. And so I would say from the successes I've seen across all the projects I've worked on or experienced or lived through, it's about finding the demand for it, figuring out what needs to happen, change, identifying that problem, and then bringing in everybody who knows how to do it. Ask the communities living on the ground. Ask the women that are victims of this. Ask the people that are living without something what they would do to fix it. And then try to help them and be a part of that and share not only in the failure but also in the success.
Thank you. And I think it's clear that all of our panelists have talked about the importance of working collaboratively. So no matter what your background or what your discipline, one of the most important things to remember is when you're doing creative problem solving, there are multiple components to that and multiple solutions that come from different perspectives and different disciplines. And in particular, thinking about local knowledge and where local knowledge brings a kind of expertise that no one coming from the outside, no matter how many books they've read or seminars they've done, can really understand. So Kennedy, could you talk a little bit about the ways in which working from within a community to do problem solving around particular issues helped you gain traction, and what you think the importance of local knowledge and expertise is in creating these kinds of projects?
So I believe in much more in partnership. But as I said before, I grew up in Kibera. So at the age of 10, I was a homeless kid because there's no food in the house. So I ran out of this. I went to the street. It was really, really hard life. And my first job was when I was 15. I was working in a factory, earning $1 for 10 hours. But I passed through a lot of hardship. What I've seen in the slums compared to rural areas, the slums are really complicated. Mostly it's much more integrated approach. You know what I mean? In the village, there are much more distances, but Kibera or other slums, it's really, really congested. So for example, what we do in Kibera now is we have a school for girls that is linked to social services, like healthcare, library, and water. And it is also very, very important that you have to listen to the people on the ground. they know a lot that we may not know. I mean, but at the same time, the people in the slums alone cannot solve it. It needs partnership. I tell you something funny. I got a scholarship to come to the United States. Since then, I'm able to work with different people, and the work we are doing in Kibera has really changed. They bring the knowledge on the ground. You bring the access. That's a fact. Resources. The two worlds must merge together. So I've seen the power of working with the people on the grassroots level really can work. And for you guys, I think you guys are going to do a lot of things. And I believe that anywhere you go, just listen. No? So, because it's very important for that. So I feel so lucky that I was able to grow up in that hard life because I learned a lot of things. Yeah.
And Nasir, you've also talked about the importance of how you can both leverage resources that universities have to offer, which are tremendous, but also how to match those with local knowledge. So could you give some examples of how you've done that in your work?
Absolutely, and Kennedy, you hit it right on point. We provide the access. The local knowledge is really what drives the success of the projects themselves. And then I learned that through many, many, many years of failures. So Empower, when it started, had a certain vision, right? You build that business model. It has a, sort of a overarching mission of alleviating poverty, specifically through waste-picking communities using renewable technology. That's a whole lot of words means absolutely nothing when it comes to the project sites. And we did a lot of what's the business terminologies pivoting. Every site that we went to, and I'll give you one of our most successful sites is in Bangladesh, in the outskirts of Dhaka. We've gone in and really what's called a sort of needs assessment. And we spent literally 6 months just understanding every part of one individual life and multiply that by about 2,500 people. And that's the kind of data that's really, really necessary, because what ends up happening is you walk by and I remember one of the kids, I think Hassan was probably around 6 years old. He's cutting different fabrics in different sizes and different color coding. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you trying to, and he's sorting it. He's saying, well, I know certain village have a lot of females, so I'm gonna have, pink colored fabrics and I'm gonna sell them for a certain price. I know this area has a lot of industries, so I know they need these kind of fabrics. I'm gonna sell this kind of plastic to this community because it's gonna cost this much. He did this himself. He just did what we would have spent 6 months doing. So that's the basic knowledge, and we sit down and have sort of a storytelling atmosphere where I'm sitting in the sites, and the few weeks that I'm there on the site, I learn more that I can ever have through sort of virtual communication. So one of the great things that I've done, and I hope that all of you do, is go to your sites, get to know, spend some time, spring break, winter break, whatever it is. Go out and see what the situation is. They'll give you what the issues are. They told us one of the cases is we have underutilized bones that we picked through the trash, and we don't know what to do with it. We have underutilized plastic. So we go back and say, okay, which professor is working in a certain category? What can we tap into those free resources? What industry is locally to me, where SCS engineers or others that are nearby the East Coast area where they have really a lot of the equipments that are sort of early versions that they don't use anymore. They're on version 10. They'll give away the version 1 if you obviously, have a proof to them that it's a worthy cause and the right vision is in mind and it's aligned with the organization. So that's what we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of partnerships, insane amount of partnerships. We've decentralized the overall organization. So every category of Empower, whether it's water management remediation plan, to fair trade, to healthcare access, to cooperative education side of things, which include vocational education, all of those have experts in different parts of the world that are going into our conference calls and institutes to say, okay, we have these visions as well, we're grassroots, how can we help you leverage your site, your in-country knowledge, and implement their ideas? So these are some of the quick strategic way of doing it. You don't have to solve any of these communities' sort of overarching problems. It's one, the key point is they have some of the solutions. They'll tell you what they want, and then your job is to find the funding and the technological and the knowledge-based resource to sort of make that project happen.
Thank you. And what's so clear, and I think it came across last night in President Clinton's plenary session as well, is building individual relationships, right? Getting to know people one-on-one and understanding how their communities function, what roles different people play in the community. So Melanie, can you talk a little bit about how you look, again, from a kind of global perspective, at the best models for relationship building in order for people to leverage all the resources that are available to them in community-based projects?
Well, I think there's one key thing that we always forget, and that's that we're all human. And no matter where you live, and if you have a lot of money or a little bit of money, we all have the same things that we need. We want to be loved, we want to be accepted, we need to work, we got to support families and friends. And the resources are a huge, huge difference between us. But if you can go back to those sort of core principles, you can start to think through what kinds of things are going to work or not work, right? If you get too far off track with any of those things and just start thinking that things are super different, I think you're gonna meet with a little more challenge in getting things implemented at the human level, because there's just a real mismatch if you don't get that right. But I would say from what I've seen, I worked at the grassroots level, on the delivery side of things, and then at other places. And I'd say, and my colleagues have said this as well, that the more bottom up you can be, and understanding of sourcing the solutions locally and getting those, gosh, what would you do about it? Well, here's what I did. Did that work? Nope. What did you do? Those kinds of sourcing. So talk to more people, ask them why and where and how. Those are the best way to get the conversation started. I mean, sometimes you do have to bring in technologies, you have to bring in other people. You're probably going to need some resources, some money to support this, access to whatever. But starting with that, I think, is a really common threat. We all got the same needs, and we need to find ways to solve problems together. I guess I've talked a little bit about innovation too. I mean, that's sort of a buzzword now and forever, right? Everything needs to be innovative and cool and whatever. And sometimes the best innovation isn't really that innovative, or it's not that sexy. If you think about the automobile, think back, like long before all of us were alive, right? When the car came out, the big deal was we got to have a car. Yay, wheels, better than horses and trains and whatever. But one of the biggest innovations since automobile is not super cool automobile, because Teslas are super cool, but it's the invention of the assembly line, which is totally not cool. But imagine how innovative that is to make cars better and get, process improvement and things like that. So sometimes, we think way up here about solutions and solving huge world problems, and it turns out it's right in front of you, and you just got to make it better. And process is a place that I think is often overlooked because it just seems bureaucratic and gross and whatever, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I would say also that I've learned over the years that most things are multidisciplinary. Like if you come in and fix one thing, you may break something else, you may make the whole thing better, I don't know, right? But these are big systems, and when we talk about urban poverty and we talk about sort of slums aren't the problem. Slums are like a place where people are collected, right? That's where they live. But there's many, many problems that people who live in these informal settlements have. And so you don't start with the problem, I'm gonna fix slums. They're not broken. It's a solution that people have made because there's nowhere for them to live. They want to be near work. They need to be in there. Like, the slums aren't bad or good. They're just where people are. Happen to be poor, usually informal. But if you can focus more on what is it the problem you're trying to solve? Are you trying to improve the safety, like you're doing, right? The safety of people who live in these places, huge problem. If you're safe, you're empowered, you can work more, your kids feel good, they go to school, yeah, do that. Or is the problem you're trying to solve, nope, these people are not citizens in their own city. That's just crazy. We need to get these people rights or access or voice or whatever that is. Yup, let's do that. But fixing slums, my mistake when we started working about a decade ago, so I was at the Gates Foundation, we were like, well, what do we do about slums? Because what we noticed was that when we were trying to either give immunizations or water programs, all the people that we wanted to touch lived in slums. And then we were like, maybe we should work on slums rather than all these other things, because that's super upstream, and then you fix all these downstream problems, right? And so we weren't sure what the problem is we were trying to solve. And so I would encourage you to, yes, textbooks are important. Yes, everything you say, sometimes you need to learn some things before, but I would encourage you to try to think differently. Think about the actual problem you're trying to solve, and don't try to take other people's advice about what that big problem is, because at least for me, it took me 2 or 3 years to figure out, wait a second, I'm not trying to solve slums. This isn't a fixable thing, right? I'm trying to solve the conditions, the empowerment, the issues faced by everybody just like me, that happen to live far away with a lot less money. And so I think for me, that was it. And the last thing I would say, that this is a little more coming from my health background, that I've learned, on the behavioral side of things, sometimes when you can't fix something or when something is super, super hard to fix, what you're missing is a clear understanding of the behavioral side of it, right? Think about diseases like diabetes or HIV. Those have huge behavioral components, and everybody knows what you need to do, right? Everybody knows you can either use condoms or you take your medications or you do what you need to do. Not all people do it, right? And it's not a knowledge problem. It's usually not an access problem, you know, all that. But there's a huge behavioral component. And so sometimes when things are not successful or don't go the way that you want, you have to really go back to think about the behavior side. And at the World Bank, wow, this past year we did a big, big study on behavioral economics, and what we learned is, oops, big piece of it. None of us know what to do about it, right? And so I would encourage you as you think through these things, don't just think about the structural changes you can make and the mathematical and the money and all these things, but think about the behavior side, because often that's the hardest one to fix.
Thank you. And of course, one of the takeaways from last night's session that President Clinton left us with is the idea that we shouldn't be afraid of not being able to do everything. We should have the courage to do what we can do, and also have the courage to fail, and understand that even in failure, there's opportunity to learn and improve. So Kennedy, could you maybe give us a couple examples or one example of a time when you felt like you weren't successful and what you did to overcome that?
Oh, thank you so much. So first of all, I think at this age, as a students, there's a time we can come up with crazy, crazy ideas. And the world will only be changed by crazy ideas. And when you have crazy ideas, people will say no. And when they say no, I think it's good. Take it back and go think again and come back to them. Tell them, this is why I believe in this, you know? So growing up in Kibera was so hard. I was inspired by Martin Luther King Jr. after reading the autobiography, when I knew that enough is enough. We can't live like this anymore. We have to change our own life. I bought a soccer ball, 20 cents. I went back to the ghetto. I called friends and the people. I said, you know what? We are changing our life. They said, Kennedy, you are crazy. Where is the donor? And I said, no, we are the donor. Women cannot be raped. Our friends are being shot. My best friend hanged himself, committing suicide. I said, guys, we can live. This is now a movement. We are creating a movement, you know. This is what an NGO. And then we were able to come together. Soccer became a way of attracting people. You know what I mean? And they were telling me no most of the time. You wouldn't believe it. Now, we are one of the largest employees in Kibera. We have over 250 people working with us in Kibera, and we serve over 70,000 people. So at that moment for me, they told me, Kennedy, you can't do it. Nobody have done it before. So why can you do it? I mean, so for me, that moment was a moment of shock. Because you know what? You feel passion, guys, you know? You feel it in your heart. You're like, yes, I believe in this. But they're telling you no. So that for me was a big challenge. Another time when I came to the States, I was really scared for leaving what I was doing in Kibera, and because I didn't know how to write proposals. You come in? That was something really tricky. The world is system, and we live in the ghetto, there is no system. We don't know how to write proposals. And that was a big challenge. And until I come to America, and that's when I learned how to write the proposals. You know what I mean? So never say die.
Thank you.
Can I add one more to that? I think both my colleagues said something very, very important. Is whatever solutions that you end up coming up with, the community itself is obviously sort of a holistic sort of feedback loop coming back to whether it's health, education, whatever categories. Even if you're focused on one single component of a project in that community, you really have to understand how that influences every other aspect of someone's life. And I think that took sort of Empower organization a lot longer to learn than we anticipated. We initially, it was technology, that's what our focus is, that's what our mission is, and let's go out there and convert slums to something else. And we learned, and we've gotten our first site, which was one of our toughest site, and I'll have to say, it was so tough that we actually have the project on hold for about 2 years now. Number of issues. It was in Karachi, Pakistan, and we made tremendous amount of progress, but we got two things wrong. One, we tried to convert slums. and not seamlessly work with the community. The other is it was all about building a biodigester. They didn't know what biodigester was. How do you even start from there? And we literally wasted over about a year and a half. I wouldn't say waste, it's always a learning, right, as Kennedy just mentioned. Those are our failures, is really thinking that, one, we can bring in, sort of far-fetched technology into the community and work with them. And who are we? I mean, a bunch of college students. But we needed to start it ground up, from the people and work up, and realize that if we build something, if we take away 5 minutes out of their normal schedule, that's a loss of money for them. So what are you doing to benefit that side? If you bring them out of the landfill, okay, that's a great thing, but what have you done now? You've improved their public health. So have you measured that? You're not focused on health, so how do you go about learning about that? Are they going less amount of times to a clinic far away? That's also killing time for them to do that, right? Now you've saved that amount. So these are all sort of key performance indicator that I think all of you at early onset try to understand, what are you doing? How do you measure it? But what is it having impact on everything else that the community is involved in? Really, really important, because you'll learn that some of the places where you thought you were doing a good job at may not be what it is, because that's taken away from something they're normally doing. They're helping you grow your project, but what are you taking them away from? Whether they're kids or school or et cetera, understanding that sort of full picture of the communities you work with is very, very important. We lost a lot of years of developing projects and forgetting that, and it resulted in, I would say, about 4 or 5 projects in different countries together that failed. And yes, we learned tremendously, but it could have been done fairly smoothly if we sort of understood everything around the project itself.
I'd say failure, it's kind of funny. My colleagues, I don't think there's such a thing as failure. I think it always helps you get to a better place, always, always. And my colleagues have given you a very grassroots perspective to this. And now that I work at a less grassroots place, let me give you 2 things that I've seen across the full spectrum that I think lead to less successful outcomes, or at least slower outcomes that you want. The first one is that everything that involves a relationship has at least 2 sides. And both sides are going to always say, what do I get? Always. We're humans, right? That's what we do. And unless you guys understand who gets what, something's going to go wrong. Something's going to go real wrong, right? Because if you're a donor and you're like, here's the outputs I want. And then on the other side of it, you're the beneficiary. You're like, well, here's the outputs I want. And the plan doesn't match that, like it's not going to work. One of you is going to be gaming the system in a weird way, and it's eventually going to break. Like someone may get away with it now, but then down the road you'll run out of grant funding or whatever. It'll just mess up. And so I'd encourage you, no matter where you sit on the food chain, right, bottom, top, middle, however it is, figure out that relationship. Who are you between? Are you the donor? Are you the grantee? Are you the beneficiary? Are you the wherever? Are you the World Bank funding the country? Whatever. Get that relationship right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to add something very important, that when you have idea, most of the time we think of resources, of donors, investors. Forget about them. Focus on the idea. I promise you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's bonus. Because you're also doing them favor. They want to invest in what they believe in. So if you have an idea, focus on that idea, make it an idea and work on it. Money, investors, they will come later.
Right,
That's my
and
advice.
the fancy way to say it is that everybody's got a mission, right? What's the mission of Clinton Global Initiative? What's the mission of the Gates Foundation? What's the mission of the World Bank? What's your mission? They're going to be different. You got to find that common ground, or it's going to take a little longer to get where you want to get. So I've noticed that when you have sort of the equivalent of what you might view as failure, it's because you have a mismatch there. And it takes some negotiating. Maybe it doesn't happen, and maybe those are not terms you want to live by, and maybe your missions are mismatched. Walk away, right? It's going to break your heart, but you got to do it. The second thing that I've learned, and this is a little more conceptual, is that the more, ultimately you want to do less and get more, right? You want to put in a whole lot less and get tons more stuff. And the better way to think about that is that it gets really, really harder if you have to have a lot of inputs to get one output. It gets really, really easy and special if you have one input and you get a lot of outputs, right? And so think about sort of one example of that we all know and love, and it's just been amazing in our lifetimes, is the idea of a mobile phone, right? Magic. Put a mobile phone in, all this cool stuff happens. If you live in Kenya, you get M-Pesa. If you live wherever, right? You get all these cool things that get enabled by a mobile phone. It's super catalytic, right? You get access to financial services. You get access to your mom who lives far away that you may or may not want to talk to. It could be a good thing. All these other things that happen because of a mobile phone. However, if you take it the other way, right? I want financial access. I got to have a bank. I got to have an identity card. I got to have access to that, be able to walk to the bank. It's like if you have too many, my experience is that things that don't do so well require lots of inputs, lots of people that agree with you, lots of people to do these kinds of, outcomes or outputs that you want. But try to think about ways that you can minimize that and get a lot of outcomes.
Great, thank you so much. So we have 1 more minute left before we open it up to Q&A. So I'm going to ask each of you briefly if you could have one takeaway for students who are starting to tackle really tough global issues. What's the most important thing for them to consider as they begin their projects? Nasir?
I would say the toughest thing was balancing where my career was headed to doing nonprofit. It's a question that I've asked many panelists in the past whenever I came to CGI U. What is that point in life where you decide to go from something you believe in, you're passionate about, but also you need to make money? It's a struggle that I face. It's a struggle that every member of our board, we started with 6 co-founders, now we're down to 2. That's across 5 years, where they've prioritized what they're doing in their life and that's obviously acceptable. You have to feed yourself and your family. I think it's the right balance. So the key takeaway is try to find a way that the organizations that you work with, even that companies that you're part of, how do you integrate with it? You can do both. I've done it for the last 8 years, where I seamlessly brought on nonprofit work to work with the companies that I work with, and it made it connected. I leave work, I'm doing nonprofit work.
Great, Melanie?
I'd say everybody tells you, find your passion, pursue this thing, do all this, you need to make money. Yes, those are super true. For me, and I'm like 10 times y'all's age, maybe at least twice y'all's age, I would say that in life, the things that have frustrated me the most have been where I need to focus, right? Because if it's easy, and I love it, it's easy to do, and other people know how to do it, and I can learn how to do it. But the places I've been able to move my career ahead, or at least move my life ahead, or learn the most, is the stuff that super frustrated me, right? I mean, I went into finance because when I was a doctor, no one could afford anything. It drove me crazy. You couldn't get good care because I had a patient once who we discharged from the hospital, and I was walking to the parking garage, and he was sitting outside by the parking garage begging for money to pay for the medicines I'd prescribed to him. And that would frustrate. I was like, what? That is not right. And so the problem wasn't me being a doctor and doing good stuff for patients. The problem was no matter what I do, frustrates the heck out of me that this guy can't afford the medicines. He's going to come back. He's going to be sick. And everything I do is completely useless. But I didn't focus on that for a really long time because I was like, I got to be a better doctor. I got to learn how to do this. I got to get more education. But what I was really going to be good at, because it frustrated me and I wanted to change it, was that he needed to be able to pay for it, right? And so I would encourage you to not be afraid of the things that frustrate you. My takeaway is that's where I've had the richest life experience, because that's where I'm going to drill down. I'm like, why does that happen? That's just wrong. I need to do that. So I'd encourage you to think about those things. As crazy as they are, they're going to drive you to change, and they're going to make you passionate about it. And they're going to bother other people too. And so you'll really be able to make change.
Kennedy?
Yes. Don't worry about the pressure. There's a lot of pressure. What do you want to do? I think you have a right not to know. So you don't know. It's true. But one thing that I believe in is that my advice is this: try, and keep on failing and failing. You will find it. Every time you try something, you are building yourself. You're building for the next level. So you may not know what you're doing now, might be what you're going to do in 5 years, but keep on trying. The last one is understand how to communicate. How can you communicate your passion? Let people see that thing in your face. Thank you.
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for a really stimulating conversation. Now it's your opportunity to ask questions of the panelists. So we have people with mics all around the room. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll call on you, and then we'll send a mic your way. Yes, in the middle. Could you please stand and identify yourselves when you ask your questions?
Hello. Hello. My name is Haley Gosha. My question is to the panelists. So a lot of us as global leaders, we want to work in communities that we might not be from. And so I want to know if you can talk on the ethics of entering into a community that is not your own, and doing work that you are passionate about.
Okay. I will try. Thank you so much, Haley. That's a very good question that many people struggle with. We don't have the answer, but this is what I think we can think about. First of all, you have to know that you have the power. You are coming from the Western Hemisphere. You are coming from the developed country. You are going to other places. And if you know that power that you have, and therefore you have to understand the ground. So most of the time, what I've seen in my life, every time, I'm being honest, when I was a little boy, when I see anybody from America, I was like, if they say any idea, I was like, oh, yes, because I wanted money. So you have to think of that power. So that person had power over me. Those people. I was 10 years old, 12. I was like, yeah. So anyway, so you have to know that people sometimes are trying not to be conscious. My friends, to be conscious all the time. Be awake. Try to understand. The world for me is a global village. Therefore, whatever is affecting Kibera is affecting United States. What's happening in Iraq affects here. You know what I mean? So you can do, the solution is partnership, just by understanding the ground. Thank you.
And I'd say, from my experience, I look really different from people that live in Kibera or Mathare. You see me walking in, you're like, what's the crazy white lady doing here, right? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I would say from my experience, you just have to be humble. Nothing is beneath you. You need to do what they do. You need to learn what they learn. You need to ask the questions that you don't understand. Don't be afraid to ask them, why do you do that? Here's why I do it. But nothing is beneath you. And the sooner you can learn that and be a part of a community and be willing to give it 100%, even if it's not really glamorous and there's no sort of media thing and no credit for stuff, and sort of get into the game and really get under the skin of the problem and be a part of a community, I think you'll be personally happier and you'll be more successful in what you're trying to do.
And just to add to that, I think they hit on two key points, right? Partnership, and the other fact is you are coming from the Western side, so a lot of doors will open up. There's so many people who line up to partner with you. I'm sitting in BRAC or sitting in USAID office and other things. It's the doors just left and right open. I've been in so many meetings and I stopped doing it. Became conscious of the fact that there's some that strategically make sense, some that doesn't. But the other really, really key thing is you'll be very surprised the amount of every country that I've been to, and it's almost every continent, they all are appreciative. I mean, they're appreciative of the fact that you're there, you're taking your time, the effort. For that reason, things just become easier. It becomes seamless, and just don't think about it. I plan the very basics whenever I go to these countries, and my flights are booked about 2 weeks before I even go, and I wing it. Don't normally do that. That's just my personality. But I go in and I set up meetings while I'm there. I'm calling them, hey, can I talk to you in about 10 minutes? I'm a block away from you. So it seamlessly works out. They're very humble that you're taking the opportunity to go there and speak to them and learn about it and help the country. So they appreciate that. That makes the rest easier.
Other questions? Yes, also in the middle right there.
Hello, my name is Kelly Atkinson. I'm a first-year PhD student in political science at Ohio State. I'm particularly interested in women's economic access as a means to reach empowerment in informal economies. And I was wondering, in your work, but specifically in the World Bank, how do you measure women's empowerment as a factor? Does that measurement change or need to change across locations? And are we limited in any way by our need to measure tangible results in the work that we do?
Yes, and yes, right? I mean, everything flows around measurement. Like, you have to prove to somebody that you did good stuff with their money. I'd say, just for your own learning, and it was my learning too, is that there's organizations that think about this all the time. Like, what does empowerment mean, right? I mean, how do you get there? And there's an organization called WeGo, Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing. WeGo.org, I think, is their website. Most of the women in the developing world, and most of the women that really, even though I would say most of us sitting in this room, me included, suffer from a lack of empowerment. Like, we really, in some way, we're all like, why, right? But I think in the informal economy, there's sort of different challenges faced by them than maybe by people in a formal economy. And whether you're a domestic worker or whether you're a street vendor or whether you're a sort of wage, day wage earner somewhere, I think the problems about empowerment, they all relate sort of to money and how money happens. And strength of a community, more women together, strength in numbers kind of situations. And so I would say there's a really good group that you might learn from. Uh-oh, my iPhone. Can't go anywhere without that thing, I'm telling you. Groups like that will teach you some ways to measure, some ways that have been measured across communities and settings. There's other groups called SEWA that we all know very much, SEWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association in India, that does this as well across a number of different places. So I would encourage you to take a look there. Different things that you might consider outputs that happen in the shorter term and then outcomes that happen in the longer term. And because women just have different responsibilities in many settings, the outcomes look more like, well, what do my children get, right? And this long ways down the road metrics to look at versus the outputs, which is like, how much money do I make? And so depending on what you want to do, I would say look at those two organizations and some of the resources they have. And you can find me after, I'll give you more places that I've seen that have had great examples of that. But good luck with your studies. I'd love to hear more about it too. Close to my heart. Yeah.
And can I just add really quick thing? So for us, that was the difficult part is, how do we measure a lot of these things? So what we've done is a more cheap route, similar to what I was telling you is there's organizations within universities that are consulting organizations. So we had PhD students and other that are part of this consulting organization. They're consulting for us and they created metrics for us. They said, this is your mission, and they spent about 1.5 years on looking at the entire Empower model to say, these are the different ways that you're going to measure yourself, tangible, non-tangible. These are the different, costs related to it. This is what you have to do to be successful in the categories that you're in. So that's a sort of free way of getting that done, where your board's not really killing a lot of time doing it. Someone else is sort of taking that as a task.
Great. Yes, right in the front.
Hi, thank you for the great deliveries that you've done. My name is Mary, and I have 2 questions. The first question is, how do you ensure that the people in the slums, that as you work to help them and give them these services, that the integrity is maintained, in the sense that they're not seen as a display or a museum for people to come and watch them every single day, and celebrities to come and take pictures with them, and how do you ensure that that is something that is not broken, their integrity, their privacy? And the second question.
Since we're running out of time, let's just go with one so we have other opportunities for other people. So who would like to address that question?
Okay, I will try. Yeah. So there's something that I've been dealing with a lot, the idea of, some people want to see the poor people to make themselves happy. I don't know how. But but I think there's something here about what we are doing in Kibera, for example. So we started this grassroots organization when I was living in Kibera. I was a teenager, started from zero and really grew up a little bit, And it's much more about the integrity. How do you make that integrity? Is by involving the people, let the community really work on it, you know what I mean? And at the same time, working with the local leaders in the community. That really means a lot. And most of the time, these things, there's something called slum tourism, These things, they happen. Most of the time, they happen with big companies that bring people to the slums, you know what I mean? And people don't like their picture to be taken, But it's always very, very important for your integrity.
You have to work with the communities. You have to fight for it. Like, wouldn't it be weird if someone showed up at your house and they were like, show me your toilet? I mean, in slums, people working on sanitation projects are like, well, where do you go to the bathroom? How do you do sanitation? They just show up at the doorstep of people in these communities. They're like, where do you go to the bathroom? I would freak out if someone showed up at my house and be like, where do you go to the bathroom? And be like, go away, right? And so no matter what part of this you work on, you got to be super protective. You got to protect the people you care about and you work for. You got to be like, no, you're not going to come take a picture. It's super inappropriate to take a picture of somebody's toilet if they don't want you to. Maybe they want you to, then go for it. But that level of respect, that's what I was talking about with the relationship, is sort of you got to understand when you negotiate something for yourself or others, protect it.
And we insist on our sites is that there's no need for PR in the beginning until we've really made some footings on the ground and actually made a difference. Then they'll understand that we need to raise more funds, and it helps to show the impact. but the other is really finding the key leaders and get their approval. Have them go to them first and never go into the sites until you truly understand the intentions behind some of the folks that are coming in, and they want to, share your ideas and let all the, the domestic folks and international folks know about your work. But a lot of it is, you're right, it's driven by the fact that they want to have a nice picture, they want to put in a newsletter, and they want to get their blog ratings up and things like that. It's very frustrating, but it's really just a combination of the two. You know the community, you understand their integrity, and you should protect it.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Oh my goodness. Right there.
Hi, I'm Ria Gasaway from Iowa State University, majoring in industrial technology. My question is, all of you had failures, and I know you were talking about the system. When adding to the system, you can break it or you can make it better. I was wondering, when do you realize at a point if it's a failure, if you're just adding a Band-Aid to the system, or can you really fix it? What were the, crucial points where you realize that?
I guess you could ask. I mean, so now I work at the World Bank, and one of the things that our president at the bank has committed to is getting feedback on all projects where there's a beneficiary. That's huge for the World Bank. I mean, we always want to do that, but how do you do that, and why do you do that? And I think that asking is a huge part of it, not just if you're the World Bank, but actually to your husband or your boyfriend or your cousin or whoever. Like, the best way to understand if you're getting what you want is to ask. And we always forget that. We just assume we're going to measure something and that's going to tell us, right? Okay, I have 16 of these and 14 of these, and this is my p-value and 2 standard deviations, and cool, I'm done. You're like, hey, is this working? You like the toilet? You using it? Feel better? Your kid's getting sick, right? I mean, ask.
Okay, so now I apologize to those of you that we didn't get to, but we do have more opportunity for discussion. So at this point, you've heard a lot from our presenters from a variety of different perspectives about the importance of building collaboration, of working to leverage local knowledge and local resources, about being passionate and persevering in your work. So now it's your time to talk at your tables about how you can take the lessons that our panelists have shared with you and apply them directly to your projects, to your commitments. Are there tangible takeaways that you have from our conversation that you see being directly relevant to your work? Can you think through that? Can you think through the ways in which learning what you've learned this morning, you now have a better sense of the ways in which you might be able to implement your projects, what kinds of pitfalls you would try to avoid, and how you will ensure that your projects are successful on multiple levels. So all of the panelists will be kind of roaming the room, checking in with different tables and your conversations. So please introduce yourselves, talk about your projects, and think explicitly about what you can learn in order to better improve the projects at hand.